All right, welcome to I Read the Clermont Sun so you don't have to on August 30th, uh, Saturday, August 30th, 2025. This is the August 28th edition of the Clermont Sun. The press deadline would have been August 25th. And before I get into the actual content of the paper, I think that one of the things that is always fun to see with the Sun is all the stuff it doesn't report on. So I just made a little list here before I got going of here's things that I think probably should have been covered in the paper that have never been covered, as far as I know. So you got the two different sex scandals at Milford Exempted Village Schools, one involving a resource officer and one involving a women's wrestling coach, never been covered. You have my lawsuit with the Clermont County Republican Central Committee, where there was an appeals court ruling that took place on August 11th, I think, or something like that. August 17th or August 11th. Never covered, ever, 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 ever. Joe Dills, as it comes to light more, the roid use and the serial affairs, never covered. That the Clermont GOP established a committee on their good name to investigate an incident 30 years ago that's not really relevant anymore, while they ignore incidents that are directly relevant that happen with people who are in office or who are key people within the party. So, by the way, Judge George Pattison, who previously to me was accused of tampering with evidence by lawyer Gary Rosenhofer, he is, I think, the head of that committee because he's a very honorable man within the Clermont GOP. You have also the Batavia Township zoning case with the Board of Elections, where the builder M.I. Homes was trying to get a referendum taken off the ballot, and the Board of Elections ruled against M.I. Homes, and M.I. Homes has now sued the Board of Elections. That's not been ever covered. The Batavia Village in the project there, in the approval vote that was taken, is not in here either. So, and then one other thing that struck me is now it's been a couple of weeks. I believe the petition deadline was August 6th for running for the November election for township trustees and school boards and so forth. And that's never been covered whatsoever. Like there's no article of who's running, who isn't running. And so that's the deal. So somebody came to me in the last week or so making an observation that my Facebook page alone, forget about YouTube and Twitter, has unbelievably more content and more traction than the Clermont Sun. The person added up and told me that there's been over 1 million views of videos that I have put on based on just adding up Facebook. Some of them are kind of head scratchers. There's one with John Becker that has 160,000 views. You wonder who are all those people watching that? So, but anyway, the Clermont Sun, I mean, the key is it sucks. It just absolutely sucks and is embarrassing. So those are just a list of, I'm sure if I would have sat here a little more beforehand, I could have come up with a lot longer list of things that they should cover that they don't. You know, they could just do the police blotters in different big townships and come up with news and information to cover. But instead, we get the headline story. Let's look at what the top front page stories for the Clermont Sun are for the edition dated August 28th. Weekly construction updates, which is a puff piece. And I keep saying over and over again, if you really gave a rat's ass, Megan, you would put this maybe in the paper every week and have a map with indicators where there's big construction going on. But you know, that would require some work, not just reprinting something the engineer gave to you and putting your name on it. All right, so that's the number one story in all of Clermont County. None of the stuff that I rattled off makes the cut. That's the number one story, weekly construction updates. Then the next big story, not, Joe Dill's roid serial affairs, 2 sex scandals at Milford schools. That doesn't make the cut, but Bat in Goshen has rabies, test positive for rabies. That's the second biggest story in Clermont County for the last week. And then the third, and I appreciate this young man going in the in the military in the Navy, but you've got, third biggest story of all of Clermont County is that a young man, um, Evan Lively, has gone into the Navy in the submarine force. Okay, so that's the third biggest story in all of Clermont County. And then Design Within Reach is expanding. And the funny, what do you love about this is how shameless. I see Claire Corcoran there. We have commissioners. You look at the celebration of tens of jobs. We'll bring tens of new jobs, tens of new jobs. I don't remember any notable or deep coverage of, thousands of jobs at TQL or things like that in this paper, but tens of jobs. But man, I mean, God forbid a new restaurant opening in Union Township generates more than tens of jobs. Which goes, by the way, this goes to nothing against Design Within Reach whatsoever, but the county at South Afton made this big play of they were going to generate 1,800 jobs. They've generated like 350 jobs or something like that in total, because a lot of these industries, like a distribution center, are all automated now. And so leave it to our commissioners to invest in industries that are eliminating jobs versus industries that bring jobs. And there's Megan Alley. I'll bet, money Megan Alley was not at this event. By the way, the front page also has a great big ad on it, down here, so that's cool. The ad is probably more useful information than the stories. All right. If you're into sewing machines and stuff, it's right there. This edition is 14 pages, so it's 2 weeks in a row they have 14 pages, which is good, I guess. Now we go everything submitted content. ODOT local road closures. Now, if you were competent and you gave a rat's ass, you would have harmonized the ODOT road closure story with the prior county engineer road closure story. Like, have one story on road closures, but we don't give a rat's ass. We're just reprinting stuff, getting it out the door. Goshen, I've observed some high schools and locations are good at submitting content. Goshen's one of them. No fault on Goshen. They figured out this paper sucks so bad you can basically submit anything and they will reprint it. So Goshen regularly does, and they're celebrating success on AP exams. Okay, congrats to the kids that did good on the AP exams. All right, more on the kid going in the Navy. Look at this. Look at how much text is on somebody going in the Navy. Look at that. Look at like half of the second page. Take out this fun fair thing. Half of the second page is this. Okay. All right. So, all right. Now we go down to the community calendar. I noticed I got to check it out. I think they quit putting the park district in there because that's where I was seeing when they were having a meeting, and I'd go to the meeting then, and Ray's like, why is Andrew McAfee, who is a weirdo, a absolute weirdo, and has basically alienated most of the people I think that were his friends because he's become such an odd guy, who worked for Winstrup at one time, very public guy, so he's a public figure, chamber VP, is on the parks board. He gets appointed to all these things because he's a yes man that bends over for the establishment. And so he keeps getting appointed to everything. He doesn't even live in Clermont County. That tells you how our Diamond Dave and the team keep appointing a person that's very odd and doesn't live in Clermont County to all these boards because he's a reliable, do what we tell you. Okay, now there's this crossword and stuff like that in the Sudoku. Let's keep rolling. Now we get into opinion. Now, John this week has two articles on the VA and stuff like this. And this is about legacy caregivers. Again, I'm all for veterans. I'd love to see John. He's never done it in the whole time I've been doing this, which was a long time now, done a single article on how we need to reconfigure spending and investment in these VA areas. To save taxpayer money. We have a $37 trillion debt, John. We are bankrupt. And so just always being at the tit, wanting more. I get it. We all want more. But I'd love to see if John can ever write an article talking about things that should be reconfigured and cut, or how we can deliver better services to veterans at lower cost by changing paradigms. I just want to remind people that you got like, you have like Twitter where Elon Musk got rid of like 80, 90% of the people and it rolls on no problem. Okay. And, just this past week, it was barely covered in the news, but there was a highly successful SpaceX Starship 10 launch. And there's a great example of, I saw this stat that a Falcon 9, which is not Starship rocket. He said, get a load of this. A Falcon 9 rocket, I think it's when a reused one, a brand new one costs more than they reuse them again and again and again. I want to say it was like less than, I don't know, 30, 40 million to put one up into space and deploy a workload. The space shuttle, back in the day, the space shuttle was $1.5 billion per launch, 1.5 billion. So you're not, everything the government does, they do at multiples more cost, and the people don't seem to get it. They don't understand that government makes stuff inefficient. Education, every aspect, okay? Everything the government gets involved with gets priced out of control. When they stay out of stuff, there's legitimate competition. That's why you can go buy a 65-inch TV for like $300-400 that used to cost 4,000 or 5,000 when they had plasma TVs, and you couldn't get bigger than like 42 inches because of competition. That's why things like LASIK eye surgery get cheaper and cheaper, because it's generally not covered. It gets in competition is good. All right, which brings me to this op-ed by Congressman Dave Taylor. And it's about drug prescription costs, and I support what he's talking about here. Basically, trying to get a requirement that the cost of drugs be included in the advertising for drugs. And I agree with that 100%, but I would agree even more with getting rid of advertising of drugs. Like, the advertising of prescription drugs is a blight on humanity. It is a absolute blight on humanity for two reasons. One, it's very unethical. The second thing is it squeezes out regular advertising. So I like to watch this thing called netball, which is a sport from Australia, and you can for almost no money subscribe to watch. And you watch the games, and they're like streamed from regular Australian television, so the ads are still in the games and everything. And they don't have pharmaceutical advertising in Australia. So the ads are things like for kids cereal. Remember if you were my age and you're young, and it used to be commercials for kids cereal. Now it's commercials for prescription medication all day and all night. So we've kind of the what's advertised changes. So I'm all for this having to include the price in the advertising. I think it would be much better to disallow pharmaceutical advertising to end consumers, because serves no legitimate purpose. Okay, just go ask your doctor why you need this drug, and should get the government to pay for it. So I think it's good here. By the way, Congressman Taylor has never ever run away from me asking him a question, which I appreciate. I have not been a fan of his. I was not for him in the election, but he's a professional guy, appears, and will take questions. And I enjoy asking him questions. I enjoy his answers. I do. There's a last part I highlighted in here. It says there's almost no other industry where the cost of what you are buying is kept secret from you. I don't know that that's true. I'm gonna make an off-color joke here and say, this is off-color joke. I don't get in trouble, but go buy a beer in a strip club, okay? The how much? $25, okay? So my point is, there's a lot of industries that try to hide the cost from you. I mean, you don't see cost advertised in car commercials. You don't see cost advertised in beer commercials. So, cost is not hidden. But the point is, in all those other things, the consumer is paying the cost. If I go buy a case of Bud Light because I saw an ad on TV, I pay for it. If I go buy a car because I saw an ad on TV, I pay for it. But in this pharmaceutical industry stuff, we have generated a feeling of entitlement that the government and other people should pay for it, and that's kind of ridiculous. That's that mentality. I think all of us would agree that there needs to be a backstop to protect people from cataclysmic medical expenses. But you know, otherwise, I think for most things, it's your own choice. I think I give an example of, I've been for a long time on a high deductible type plan, and I'm going to make educated decisions on when I go to the doctor. If I have a cold or the flu, I give people run to the doctor and run to the emergency room every 5 minutes for things that when I was a kid, you'd never go to the doctor for. Okay. Sometimes they go to the doctor just so they can get a prescription so they can pay less for the same thing they could buy over the counter that is a prescription then. All right. So, by the way, John gets the second article here, blah, blah, blah. John. And then there's a whole bunch more on this on the law thing. There's a whole bunch more coming later. All right. Now, there's an article here. I'm going to breeze past the sports section, which is always good. By the way, there's this obituary of a young man who passed away here. So my heart goes out to his family. Um, the article here on scrolling ourselves to death is Scott Hoganson. I love that Megan or whoever's picking these, they pick these authors that are always these like establishment type people. This one's from Dallas, Fort Worth. Okay. And he's ripping on social media. Now, scrolling ourselves to death, social media in America promotes a lot of wacky stuff. What's that wacky stuff, Scott? I'm not disagreeing, but what about wacky stuff like that the Hunter Biden laptop is fake? How about that wacky stuff? Who promoted that? How about wacky stuff like that Donald Trump is a secret server to communicate with the Russians in Trump Tower? How about that wacky stuff? Who promotes that wacky stuff? Okay. So this guy has obviously a mentality of stupid, of what I call F-tard. Okay. Social media absolutely has a lot of crap on social media. But the point is that the mainstream media has more crap and does it under the credibility. A lot of shit you see on most social media, you're never going to think you're not going to give it a lot of credibility, but you got these idiot, actors who are news people that are telling you stuff that's blatantly wrong and they never have any accountability. So he says there are, so of course, some instances in which social media provides constructive content. This guy's a F-tard. Okay. Social media provides a ton of useful content. It does a lot of crap too, but there's a ton of useful content. I learned more about like SpaceX and Tesla and a whole bunch of stuff on social media than I would ever learn in the mainstream media. And I give credence to different sources. I think it'll work out over time on some of the stuff, but I appreciate that there's actually a town square in social media where the voices are not controlled by F-tards like the Scott Hoganson. Okay, so then he's got, this epistemology of social media is one that by some accounts is rewiring a lot of brains. Okay, I'm not again. I agree with that. It's not good in a lot of cases, but isn't the mainstream media rewiring a lot of brains when you see people rioting in the streets over crazy shit don't make no sense? That they've been wronged and emotional and hands up, don't shoot, just outright media lies. George Floyd, all this kind of stuff. Isn't that rewiring brains, dumb F-tard? So Scott the F-tard, isn't that rewiring brains also when the mainstream media is parroting false narratives to whip people up and cause riots? That's kind of rewiring the brain too, dumb, eh? And TV news, then he gets praise to TV news. TV news goes through an editorial process that sometimes vets the conveyed knowledge for accuracy. All right, that's what it is. F-tards like Scott. F-tards like Scott get the vet what we're allowed to hear. Okay. And I love that. By the way, I love that he mentions books like Orwell and Brave New World. What Orwell and Brave New World feared is what Scott is. That's what they feared, the F-tard elite that think they should control the Ministry of Truth. That's what they feared. The thing about social media that drives the establishment crazy is it democratizes information. And so the establishment tries to control it, right? Because we're too stupid to be able to discern what's real and what's fake. But on the other hand, hands up, don't shoot. George Floyd, go riot right now and burn your city down. Okay. So, and then we've got, something here, elderly woman, oh, God forbid an elderly woman would have an opinion and express it. Okay. She's not allowed to do that. Yeah, right, Scott. Elderly women, what are the dumbasses? What are the elderly women, especially women, Scott, right? Why did you choose elderly women? Why didn't you put, sometimes it's a Black person in this inner city. Why don't you do that? Why don't you put in some other names there? To say to point out that you're basically, it's not racist, but you're classist. You are classist. So elderly women aren't your class. So you look down on your own mom, probably, Scott. Celebrity bemoaning lawless people they've never met. Okay, whatever. Okay. Occasionally subject to people who are angry about disease, while others choose to shriek at a stranger rather than simply walk away. I'm not aware on social media that you walk a lot. You mostly sit. Anyway, I just love these. Where do they pick these articles? And do they not have the ability at this paper to go get an editorial panel to write editorials for them? I mean, establish an editorial board for this paper. Hey, call me up. I'll be on your editorial board, dumbass. And then have those editorial board members be responsible for occasionally penning an article under their own name or for writing articles for the paper, when the paper takes an editorial position. Well, that would cause Megan to have to do something rather than reformat a press release she received. Okay, I'm going to try to fly through the rest of this because you got submitted content from Purina. We're going to keep going here. Now we get into the sports. I'm going to go fast. Jake Dowling, great job. Always good content. Shows what you can do when you give a rat's ass. Megan's the opposite. Okay, and down here, there's an article here I wanted to hit on real quick. He's got all the pictures. He's out at these events. By the way, now we got the payola part. I always bring this up. That there's a law that makes the government have to advertise in papers like this, and these public notices paid for by the government keep the paper afloat. That's why the paper cannot ever be critical of the government. Our paper, if this Clermont Sun, if they were ever critical of the government can switch to print these ads in the Enquirer for a little bit, drive the Sun out of business, and then be in good shape. Okay. So there, you're never going to find it. So we're back to the content. Jim Tressel, what a joke. Why is Jim Tressel the lieutenant governor? And how's a stereotypical Jim? You're doing some sports thing. Getting tattoos for anybody, Jim? How about that? How about we arrange the the Tressel tattoo challenge? All right, and then some ads here. Jake Dowling, more. I mean, this guy writes like half the damn paper. Now, there's an article in here, and I'm looking at the clock. I'm a little behind where I want to be. But Jake Dowling talks about himself being a reporter, and I thought it was interesting, how it's rewarding local kids with public exposure. I mean, you could tell this guy cares, It's just a shame that the vehicle he's in is so bad. I wish it would contact me someday because I think there could be much better opportunities for Jake to publish in a different way than this to get more traction and also have higher income. He also says you can follow him on X. So, if you subscribe to the paper, maybe you instead you could go look and see what he puts on X and see how much you need the paper versus what he puts on X. It would be better to, like, if this guy does Patreon or something, give him some money through Patreon than buy this paper, right? And he wants to get to know the readers, especially if it leads to a story. Well, Jake, why don't you do a story on what schools do to protect student athletes? So I get that maybe you're not going to do the story on the sex scandals and alleged sex scandals involving a resource officer and a coach, two different events at Milford Exempted Village Schools. But it might be a good story, an interesting story to do. What are the protocols in place and what are the best practices to protect students and student athletes at schools from bad intended adults? Okay. And so that's something that you could look at. What I think would be a good story. All right. And then we've got some more pictures here. Again, this guy must be everywhere. I was like, I got to go to some of these things. I bump into him. And all right. And then you've got fall sports previews coming in the next edition. Then there's a submitted story from Batavia Village. An important story about your cats being dehydrated. It doesn't even have, or dogs, that doesn't even have any byline whatsoever. Got your horoscopes, Labor Day sale out at the Amish place in West Union. You can go out there and check out, get to see where Aaron Haslam doesn't live. Take your picture in front of Aaron Haslam's apartment. And all right, and then we got the Jungle Gyms ad. All right, where am I looking on time here? 3 minutes to Let's get the Jungle Gyms music playing. There we go. All right, Jungle Gyms open daily 8 to 10, including Labor Day. So just so you know, Jungle Gyms open. All right. Unbelievable deals every week. Unbelievable. Okay. Beef ranks 475. I just bought some of these at Walmart, and I don't know if that's a better price or not. Okay. But okay. A lot of great meats at Jungle Gyms. I get why you'd go buy groceries at Jungle Gyms because they've got such an assortment of stuff you probably can't get elsewhere. Chips on sale, $1.99. Um, Liquid Death. What is this? Okay, maybe get some of that for handing out to some people I know. The Liquid Death. See that in there? Liquid Death. Criminal or psychocide? Serial criminal or psychocide at 475. App price. Gotta buy it in the app. I might have to get some of that. It'd be fun to hand to a friend. Hey, here you go. Have a Liquid Death. Okay, now we go down to podcasts. Wow, that pork roast looks delicious, doesn't it? And then you've got Hans wieners here. What were that? Was $4.79 or something for the Nathans and $2 for $5 for Cons. Fish with heads on it. Not for me. Farm fresh produce. Good stuff. Some Jungle Gym stuff like the buffalo chicken dip. I bet that'd be good to go get that just so it's like the people around in my neighborhood make that kind of stuff. Got your Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce and some sort of craft sauce. 2 for $3. Fruit drinks. What plates? Let's see this one. Foil. Napkins. All right. Ranch dip. Love ranch dip. My wife makes ranch dip a lot, and then I get the store-bought ranch dip, and I think the one she makes is better. And then than the store-bought. And then cookies and bakery goods from Jungle Gyms. And we're getting close to the beer, I think. Let's see if they got Natty Light in here this time. They used to have it every time, but I haven't had it in a couple. Coffee month, get your caffeine in. Don't forget, Golden Buckeye, 5%. And then we're going to go down. You got your Asian Indie, you got your toys and collectibles, weird stuff usually. It's like, whoa, where did these come from? Rock Your Walls music drawn posters. I don't know what that means. This looks like Star Wars stuff to me, but whatever that is. Music drawn posters. Maybe that's something people know what that is. Pop. Gatorade, 99-cent 2 liters. I was some lady in the Walmart asked me to get a 2 liter down for her. It was up high, and it was like $2 or something. I'm like, I remember when these were 99 cents. When I was a kid, when I was younger, and it looks like you can get 7-Up varieties 99 cents. What's all a 7-Up variety? And we're gonna get to the beer. We got Natty Light. Oh, no Natty Light. Okay, so we got, but I'm gonna go back. This looks like prostitute beer here. Brew Kettle Oktoberfest. Prost. So I don't know. $10.99 for a 6-pack now. I want to go back here though. That you have my favorite thing in this whole ad. I don't know that I've ever circled back to look at something. My favorite thing in this whole ad is this. Okay. Liquid Death. I got a 475. I got to go over there without app 649. So I'm gonna have to get the app and get some Liquid Death. And that out to my friends. So, any event, that is the Clermont Sun for the August 28th edition on August 30th. And thank you for tuning in. And remember, all the stories that I read off, just from writing it down on a piece of paper beforehand, that this paper doesn't cover. I mean, it's so ridiculous. You have to try hard if you're this paper. If they just perused social media or my social media, they could radically improve the content of this newspaper. But I don't think they really care. And they had, what did I tell you? They had last time when I tried to was going to get some advertising, they only had 11. It was 1,133, I believe, print print subscribers, and then they sell some at a few newsstands. And I just don't know, other than the government ads, how this thing stays in business. All right, have a great weekend. Ohio State at noon. If you're into this, one of the things I'm reporting on is that Ohio State has a program by which they don't actually sell a bunch of their tickets at face value. They are the scalper, and they have a deal with third-party sites where they give tickets that have never been sold to the general public, and they get sold at multiples over face value, and the university profits from that. So think about that. There's a chunk of tickets that Ohio State never sells to the general public, and that they are actually the ticket scalper working with that preferred provider called Tickets for Less to be a scalper to get people to pay, 3, 4, 5 times the face value of the ticket. It's dirty. It's a public university. It basically says F the fans. But check that out on the Watchdog Wire.